The courier knocked at my door at 9:14 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I hadn't slept more than 40 minutes all night. My newborn daughter, Lily, was finally asleep against my chest. My body still ached from the emergency C-section 3 weeks earlier. I could barely walk without pain. I thought the envelope was flowers. Instead, it was my termination packet, a thick white envelope stamped with the logo of the company I'd given 6 years of my life. To 6 years, late nights, missed holidays, cross-country flights, and they fired me while I was holding my newborn baby. Not even a phone call, not even an email, a courier opened the packet with shaking hands while Lily slept beside me, due to departmental restructuring. That was the first line, but then I saw the signature at the bottom, my boss, Daniel Mercer, the same man who smiled at my baby shower 2 months earlier and promised, "Your position is completely secure." That was the moment something inside me broke. But Daniel made one mistake, one massive mistake, because buried deep inside my executive severance package was a legal clause he never bothered to read. And within 8 months, I didn't just get my job back, I owned the entire company, and the people who fired me had to ask permission to enter my office. Welcome to the Revenge Files 396, your daily dose of the most intense, emotional, and satisfying revenge stories on YouTube. Subscribe now for more Reddit revenge, betrayal stories, and dramatic real-life inspired content. Before motherhood, my entire identity was work. I was senior operations director at Halcyon Dynamics, a fast-growing logistics tech company in Chicago. At 34, I'd helped scale the company from a tiny startup into a corporation worth hundreds of millions. I built systems, negotiated contracts, fixed disasters nobody else could solve. People called me the closer. Even Daniel relied on me constantly. At first, he respected me. Then the investors arrived, and suddenly, the company culture changed. The meetings became colder. The executives became younger, louder, more aggressive. Every conversation became about efficiency, scalability, lean restructuring. And when I became pregnant, I noticed the shift immediately. They stopped inviting me to high-level strategy dinners. My responsibilities quietly moved to male coworkers. Daniel stopped asking for my opinion in meetings. Then came the comments. "Will you really come back full-time? Motherhood changes priorities. Maybe this is a sign to slow down." They smiled while saying it. That made it worse. The birth nearly killed me. 32 hours of labor emergency surgery, internal bleeding. Complications. I remember lying in the hospital bed, unable to hold Lily for nearly 12 hours because my arms were trembling too hard. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing. Emails from work. Quick question. Need approval ASAP. Can you jump on a call? I answered them anyway, because I still believed loyalty mattered. 3 days later, Daniel sent flowers. White roses. The card read, "Focus on family." We've got everything covered. That lie aged beautifully because 2 weeks later, I was unemployed. After opening the termination packet, I called HR immediately. No answer. I called Daniel, straight to voicemail. Then finally, HR scheduled a transition call. As if my life was some spreadsheet adjustment, the HR director, Melissa, spoke in the same robotic tone airlines use during turbulence. This restructuring was purely financial. We appreciate your contributions. This decision was not performance-based. Then I asked the question, why was my entire department eliminated? Except for the 3 men who reported to me? Silence. Then, the new structure better aligns with future organizational goals. Corporate language for, "You became inconvenient." I looked down at my daughter sleeping in my arms and felt humiliated. Not angry yet. Humiliated. Like motherhood had erased my value. Like giving birth made me disposable. That night, I cried so hard Lily woke up screaming beside me, and for the first time in my adult life, I genuinely felt powerless. 3 weeks later, I met with an employment attorney named Rebecca Sloan. I expected sympathy. Instead, she looked furious. Halfway through reviewing my severance documents, she paused, then slowly smiled. "Did they seriously sign this?" I leaned forward. "What?" Rebecca turned the papers toward me, buried in the original executive compensation. Agreement was a clause created years earlier during investor negotiations, a clause I barely remembered. If an executive was terminated during protected medical leave while company valuation changed through restructuring or acquisition activity, the terminated executive automatically retained accelerated equity conversion rights. In simple English, they accidentally gave me immediate access to stock options worth millions. Daniel thought he was saving money by firing me. Instead, he triggered a clause that handed me enormous ownership leverage, and there was more. The company was secretly preparing for a major acquisition merger. Their stock value was about to explode. Rebecca looked at me and said, "They didn't just discriminate against you. They handed you a weapon." That was the exact moment my sadness turned into strategy. Stopped crying after that meeting, not because life became easier, but because I finally had direction while recovering at home with a newborn. I started studying the company finances every night at 2 a.m. bottle in one hand, financial reports in the other. I learned the investors were unhappy with Daniel. Revenue looked good publicly, but internally, operations were collapsing. Projects delayed, clients leaving, employee turnover exploding. Daniel had sacrificed long-term stability for short-term numbers. Classic ego leadership. Then, Rebecca introduced me to an investment group interested in hostile acquisitions. At first, they ignored me until I showed them internal operational forecasts. Then, suddenly, they listened very carefully. Because I knew every weakness inside Halcyon Dynamics, every vulnerability, every hidden liability, the same company that treated me like dead weight was now funding my revenge through their own incompetence. Over the next 4 months, everything happened quietly, painfully quietly. While Daniel celebrated magazine interviews and investor conferences, I bought shares, piece by piece. The investment group backed me heavily after realizing the board lacked operational leadership. And then the merger rumors leaked publicly. Stock prices surged, panic spread inside the company. Executives started dumping shares, including Daniel. Big mistake, because every share he sold increased my position. By month 7, I controlled enough voting power to force an emergency board review. Daniel still had no idea. He thought I was at home changing diapers. In reality, I was preparing to remove him from the building he thought he owned. The day of the board meeting, I wore the same navy blue suit I'd worn during my first executive promotion. I hadn't worn it since before pregnancy. It fit differently now. So did I. When I walked into headquarters carrying Lily's photo in my bag, the receptionist froze. People stared like they'd seen a ghost. Then the boardroom doors opened. Daniel looked up from his laptop, and all the color drained from his face. "Claire?" I smiled politely. "Good morning." The legal team began presenting acquisition documents. At first, Daniel looked confused, then concerned, then terrified, because slide by slide, he realized exactly what was happening. Finally, the chairman spoke. "Effective immediately. Controlling ownership has transferred." Silence filled the room. Daniel actually laughed nervously. "You're joking." Then Rebecca slid the final paperwork across the table. "No," she said calmly. "We're not." I will never forget his expression, not because he lost power, but because for the first time, he understood what he'd done. He fired a woman during maternity leave, believing she was weak. He never imagined she could become his boss. Daniel was removed within 48 hours. HR leadership resigned shortly. Afterward, an internal discrimination investigation exploded publicly. Former employees began sharing stories. Apparently, I wasn't the only woman pushed out after pregnancy. The media loved the story. But honestly, the headlines meant nothing to me. The real victory happened weeks later. I created the company's first paid extended parental leave program on-site child care, protected return to work contracts, mandatory anti-discrimination oversight. The things they denied me became permanent company policy. Because revenge feels good for a moment, but changing the system, that lasts longer. Sometimes people ask if buying the company made me happy. No. My daughter made me happy. Buying the company restored my dignity. There's a difference. The last time I saw Daniel, he avoided eye contact in the lobby. I almost felt sorry for him almost. Then I remembered opening that termination packet while holding my newborn daughter, and I realized something important. The strongest people in the world are often dismissed. During their weakest moments, that's why arrogant people lose so badly, because they mistake silence for helplessness, and they never see the comeback coming.